Hello, everyone. This is BigReed with another episode of Gaming's Lost Memories. This is episode 32, and today we will be discussing The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom for the Nintendo Switch 2. So, kind of funny. I know we're talking about the a 2-year-old video game. um, so, what kind of spawned this, right? Well, The Legend of Zelda is arguably my favorite video game franchise of all time. I remember like back in the day, on NES, Super Nintendo, 64, I always felt like Mario, and I still feel this way actually, but Mario was always further reaching and more mainstream. Um, and more popular, generally higher sales figures, things of that nature. Um, and I've always loved Mario games. Super Mario Brothers 3's in my top 5. Oh man, that would be tough. I'm gonna have to do a podcast that just breaks up, you know, the this iteration of the game industry is like old at this point, and a lot of my feelings and experiences were, NES, Super Nintendo 64, which represented like what the first like 10 to 12 years. And geez, okay, so what, I want to say Ocarina of Time came out in 98. So what, 25? So 27 years have happened since. That's really hard. So it's like, so much of the history, the lost memories, like all of these experiences are represented by like 1/3 of time of this iteration of the game industry, and the other 2/3 is like it's really wild to think that. And one of the funniest things, and I might break this down in another video, is just the term nostalgia. And I have to make sure that, if I do a podcast on it, I actually have to, enunciate it correctly, pronounce it correctly. But I remember one of my funniest memories from back in the day. This is just a side note, and this will happen with this podcast a lot. I bounce around, but it just reminds me of things. Is, you would play a game from the previous generation, and then like, the PS2 era came out, and they're like, oh, you just think Mario 3 was good because of nostalgia. And I'm like, bro, I just played that game last week. It's still good. What are you talking about? Like I experience that feeling now. And it could be like a sound that you're like, whoa, man, that's a good sound. That reminds me of X, like a menu sound or a sound effect in a video game or something like that. But I definitely was not experiencing that feeling then, which is like so hilarious because you'd be on the message boards arguing and everybody's fighting, and it's like, oh, you only like this because of this, and and I'm like, now I experience nostalgia, now because I'm old. But back then, not enough time. I was like, yo, I just played this game the other day. Like I'll never forget. Like the PS2 was still out. And I remember, like I like the original Kingdom Hearts. The only thing I don't like about the original Kingdom Hearts, honestly, is when you swing your Keyblade and you hit something that can't like take damage, like you hit a rock or hit a wall, like it knocks your character back and just like disrupts the gameplay. That always like annoyed me. But they're like, yeah, you just feel that because I'm like, I just played this game. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not true. I just played it last week. Like, it's still a fun game. It's still a good game. And to kind of feed into that thought, so why am I talking about a 2-year-old game? Well, Tears of the Kingdom got a Switch 2 update, but a Switch 2 version, and this is also my first experience with the game. And, while I have been trying to actively recover from a surgery, I had some time where I just physically could not walk. So my goal was, okay, we're gonna do your stretches, we're gonna do your resting, we're gonna, make sure that you recover post surgery. But I really wanted to focus on playing some games that I want to play, and or playing good games. And back in the day when I had a lot more time, and a lot more free time, especially, is like, you can play a game that you might want to kind of, I'll throw my hat in the ring. I'll play this game. It's not that great. It's okay. Like, it's a decent game. It's not like you're not having fun, but this isn't going to get 10 out of 10. This isn't going to be a generational game. Like, you can tell it's like, hey, this isn't that great of a game, but I'm playing it. I'm having fun. I got the free time, with the free time being more limited, I'm like, okay, I have to play. I want to play the games I want to play because life is short. So, recently I've kind of gone back and have been playing through the Zelda franchise of, Wind Waker came out on the Switch too, so I did a podcast on that, but I went back and played that. Majora's Mask, I went back and played. Ocarina of Time's next, but I was very excited because I never got to experience Tears of the Kingdom just yet, just due to time constraints and everything. Plus, the new hardware made it intriguing to, play some of these games that were originally developed on the Switch, which was an underpowered console. I shouldn't say underpowered because, but what I will say is a lot of these games that are getting the updates for the Switch 2 that Nintendo developed, they are benefiting from the increased hardware, and it is, just from how it functioned, Tears of the Kingdom runs really well on the Switch 2. So it's like, if Zelda continues to look and feel like this, then I think I can be pretty happy where the franchise is going. It's also really fascinating to see how innovative Nintendo is. Because if you look at a lot of other, game companies, they have not lasted, 40 years or however long this has been with their, IPs. Like, it's very interesting. We just got a new Silent Hill game, but that franchise like died for a while and they just gave up on it. And I remember during the PS2 era, that was like, that and Resident Evil. Resident Evil made a resurgence as well, which was really cool. But it's like those franchises, it was like, yeah, the new Resident Evil came out, the new Silent Hill game came out. And then it was just, Silent Hill was just gone for 15 plus years. And Nintendo didn't really experience that. And their dedication to change and innovation is almost kind of scary, to be honest, because I understand, like, if you don't change, you die, right? So you can't keep making... I mean, honestly, I don't know if you could. They might be able to get away with it. You can't keep making, the same exact Super Mario Brothers. It can't look like Super Mario Brothers 1, like just do a couple different levels. Like, you have to create, new powers. And the same thing with kind of Zelda. It's like they have continued to innovate and change to the point, especially with Zelda. I mean, Mario, I'm kind of just like, Mario's Mario. You're jumping around, you're running, like, it is what it is. Like, I prefer, I think, 2D Marios. Man, I don't know. Some of the 3D ones are really good. But saying all of that, like, they've always pushed, Nintendo has always pushed for change and innovation. And, like, could you imagine if you created Ocarina of Time? And the perception of that game, and that's getting its own podcast because I'm about to do a playthrough of that as well. But to just be like, everyone's like, this is the perfect game. Okay, just keep it exactly the same, basically. Like, just keep doing that, It just doesn't work. And somehow Nintendo has found a way to not only make games for the previous audiences, but also create new experiences in these franchises for just completely different groups of people. And it worked. So I kind of want to talk about Breath of the Wild as well, because I think it's important to kind of like, how did we get here? So, with the 3D Zeldas, so we've kind of made our way all the way up to Wind Waker. You had Twilight Princess, which was developed originally for the GameCube, but that also launched as a launch game. This is going to be really funny. As a launch game for the Wii. And they pressed the magical button and they inverted the entire game because, everybody's basically right-handed, and Link is traditionally left-handed in the games. So for the Wii version, the sword has to be in your right hand so you can use the Wiimote. So they literally like mirrored the game, which is such an odd concept. Like, just Nintendo is just absolutely wild. So it's like, hey, a lot of people for Twilight Princess consider the GameCube version to be like the main version of the game. And I wish I had a copy of it. I feel so dumb for not buying it, but I bought it on the Wii and beat it on the Wii. So I wish I had the GameCube version though. It would be weird to play it because it's the opposite of what I experienced. Then you had Skyward Sword, and once again we're talking about innovation and change. And this is the only Zelda game I actually don't like. Nintendo has the Nintendo Wii and one-to-one motion controls, and they're going to bundle, the new Wiimote with the one-to-one motion controls, Wii Motion Plus or whatever they called it at the time, built into the Wiimote, so it's not huge. And they're going to package that with this title, and they basically built the game from the ground up with motion and sword play and like all of that in mind. Now, where we kind of leave off to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is Skyward Sword. And this is tough to say because I do feel like Nintendo, by Nintendo fans and a lot of like the media and like reviewers and everything, they were given a lot of grace with how the gameplay actually translated to the experience. I did not like it. That was a hard pill to swallow because like the Zelda series was pretty much my number one series, and it might have become Final Fantasy for a period there, but it was arguably like what I thought is like the pinnacle of gaming, mixed with also my personal favorite video game series. And just to like play the game, I'm like, I don't like playing it. That was hard. So I'm like, okay. And around that time too, Final Fantasy kind of just the wheels fell off, and, Sakaguchi, who created the series, isn't even there anymore. And it's just this new weird experience. So it's like, so I really was like questioning myself, which I think, now where I'm currently at 2025, in the past like year or so, of like kind of going back and replaying some of these games and just, going in with a clean slate of like, is the experience of this video game that I'm about to play, are my lost memories, so to speak, going to match what I remember and what I'm going to experience in 2025? And so far, largely of the games that I did enjoy at the time that I thought were good, we've been good. Skyward Sword I didn't like at the time, and I tried playing the Switch version. I don't like the game. I don't like it. So for me, that was a pretty like bitter pill to swallow because we have a 5-year development cycle for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, Breath of the Wild got everyone hyped up because what this was going to be was a modern Zelda in an open world setting. Like, you can go anywhere, you can do anything, it's going to play different. And Breath of the Wild is probably the most different Zelda experience that I feel that you can experience. So there's a lot of different ways that you can experience Zelda. Like, I am fully fine if somebody says, I like the 2D Zeldas and that style, and I like, the original, A Link to the Past, maybe the 3DS, A Link Between Worlds, Link's Awakening and the other portable ones, the remake of Link's Awakening. You can tell me that and be like, I think those 2D Zeldas are the best experience of Zelda. And I completely see it. I can play that. I think 2D Zeldas and 3D Zeldas should exist in the same, world. I think Nintendo honestly should continue making 2D Zelda games. I really hope they don't stop. If you have, another developer in-house that can just work with 2D Zeldas, I think they're still great. I thought the 3DS, A Link Between Worlds was phenomenal. The only thing, kind of takes you out of the video game setting because, there's a character that's like, hey, I'm this guy, and you can take these items and go wherever you want. And that's kind of like tongue-in-cheek, like it's kind of like breaking the fourth wall a little bit there. But I guess old games did that too. And it's kind of funny. Like you would have like a press start to do this, like it, you know. And some games don't do that. Like they don't acknowledge that they're video games. So, like it's just like go and do this. It's not like press the A button to do this. Like you don't have like a character in the world, like a main character of like take this shield and press B to block attacks. It's like press B. What? What does that even mean? You're like, oh yeah, it's not talking to Link. It's talking to the player. So I can have somebody and understand completely that they want to have 2D Zelda games. Like that's how they view Zelda. Then I can understand the 3D Zelda games because the 3D Zelda games are phenomenal too. You have Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, both awesome. I still like Wind Waker. And then eventually I'm hoping they bring Twilight Princess to the Switch too. I would really like to experience that. I did 100% run on the Wii and then I did not play it again, and it's not on anything like modern console wise. I remember liking it, but I think it would be good to get a refresher and see like how I feel about it now if it still remains the same. A lot of people love Skyward Sword. That was the other thing. Like I feel like Nintendo was handed like endless grace during that time, where it's like, I've read modern reviews where they're like, hey, the motion controls aren't great. And to me, controls and playing the game are a part of gameplay, which is like the heaviest metric in if a game is good. Is the game fun to play? If it is not fun to play, especially because of something stupid like controls, or design or something like, okay, hey, a great example. You're playing a game and the response time from the controls to the character that you're moving around is 2 seconds off. You would hate the game. You'd be like, this is terrible. I can't even play it. And that's part of gameplay. And that's why like Skyward Sword is like, I look at it, I see the visuals, I see the story, I see the temples. I'm like, please make me have fun. And I'm just not having fun. But saying all of that, a lot of people do view that game as like a great 3D Zelda. So, now we have two Zelda experiences. You have your traditional 2D experience, you have your 3D experience, and I can completely fully understand groups saying, I like this, I like this. Like, hey, it's apple juice or orange juice. They're both juice, but they got different flavors. I get it. Now you have modern Zelda. So this is 2017. So this is, 8 years? 8 years of modern Zelda, open world Zelda. In Breath of the Wild, funny enough, this is going to sound like Twilight Princess, but Breath of the Wild was designed for the Wii U, RIP, Wii U, RIP. But also, because it took so long, and the Wii U, honestly, this is such a bummer, was not successful. They ended up launching it on the Wii U, but then, the focus was, here's our Switch, here's our new console, and it was a launch title. Now, Breath of the Wild was an absolute smashing success based upon, just about any single measurement of it. And I remember, Ocarina of Time being kind of like the gold standard of sales for the Zelda franchise. And I want to say it sold like 10 million copies. Well, guess what? Breath of the Wild sold like 33 million copies, or over 30 million copies. That is a crazy... So many of their Nintendo's franchises on the Switch just grew exponentially. And I think it's partially from their innovation and design. They made quality games. The Switch speaking to the, classical gaming crowd that is now older and wants to play these games, but might not be able to sit down at a traditional console. I think Nintendo's renewed focus of only having one hardware platform to focus on, so they merged all their development teams. Now they only have one console. They used to have a portable market. They used to have a console market. Now it's merged together. And then lastly, and possibly most importantly, Nintendo's... They worked very hard on the Switch concept and to sell that thing. And it sold, over 150 million units. So you just have like people buying these games, like just, it's crazy. Like 30 million copies for a Zelda game is just like bonkers. So the game was also very different from any of the other Zelda games. Now, there's good and there's bad in that. The good is you have this gigantic open world experience. And here's a very important way to kind of, how do you want to say this? To phrase it. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are super open world, meaning everywhere the player can go is in one plane, essentially. And we'll break this down in Tears of the Kingdom a little bit because they kind of added some really cool new things in it. But it's like, if you're going to go in a building, the building's right there. So, like, you go into it, you walk in, like, you're a part of that world. You don't have to exit or enter a teleportation thing that takes you into something. So, this reminds me of old Zelda and, like, Pokemon. You know, if you go into a cave, the game loads an entirely new area and you are no longer outside. You are inside a pre-programmed cave. And like how Ocarina of Time would work, for example, is like you would walk in and the game would check like the items that you had and say, okay, so you're going in this cave or you're going through this teleportation thing. Because of where you're at in the story, it's going to teleport you to this area, which is designed. That's how people like break those games, is they, like have an item or don't have an item or like sneak past it and it teleports them to the very end of the game. That's a funny glitch in Ocarina of Time, is like you can do something and when it goes to teleport you somewhere in the world that you're supposed to go, it teleports you to the very end of the game in Ganon's castle instead. And it's like, oh, interesting. So that's how this was programmed. So that is a very drastic difference. So everything's basically like open world. It's all out there. And when you're standing outside, like you're in the plane of existence of the entire world. Where old games, you would have to go, like you'd go in a cave or you'd go in a temple and, then it loaded a new area and you were only in there when you were in there. That's a huge difference. And that, I know, first of all, I can't even believe that they made Breath of the Wild for the Wii U. That would be really fun to just like play through. I'd just be very curious how it ran, because it was a little choppy on the Switch, which was like their new hardware. But thankfully on the Switch 2, Nintendo is giving people the option to pay $10 or whatever it is, or I don't even know if you had to pay the $10 because I think it might have been free. Like you get the free upgrade if you own the base game or something like that. I can't remember. It was either $10 or free, whatever. Needless to say, I did play Breath of the Wild. So there's a lot of good there where there's a new way of playing the game. There's a new way of storytelling. There's a new way of, having combat. There's a new way of exploration. There's a new way, everything is just new, right? And they also introduced like physics-based elements too. You can chop a tree down and pick up a log, using a magnet. I can't remember with Breath of the Wild, but long story short, there's a lot of good that came of that. The downside is because this is so drastically different from the traditional Zelda formula, I did feel like Breath of the Wild was a really amazing game. But in terms of 3D Zeldas, I would put it above Skyward Sword, but I don't know what else I would put it above. Like, it's really good, but it's kind of lacking as a Zelda game. And the biggest reason why, and probably one of the reasons why I love the Zelda series so much, is basically it's the blueprint for like any modern video game. And I don't think you can get around it. Like, I think if you are saying, hey, I'm developing a game and this is what you're going to do, it's going to be like, oh yeah, oh, it's an adventure game? Okay, yeah, it's basically copying like everything Zelda did, even if you're doing it differently. Like, the ideas came from, 40 years ago of when they launched the original Zelda. But in particular, I have always loved the exploration, finding items, the puzzle solving inside of temples. And temples, like when you go inside a temple, man, I love old Zelda temples. You go in there and you're finding keys, you're finding items, you're fighting bosses. That is one of the best feelings ever, is like solving all of these puzzles to navigate through the temple and then fighting a giant boss that has a cool name, just like an epic boss battle, using your weapons you got. I can look back to Ocarina of Time and it's like, you get the hammer and you're fighting the dragon, right? You get the hook shot and you're in the forest temple and you're fighting Phantom Ganon. It's just a really cool experience. And I really enjoyed traditional 2D and 3D Zelda temples. Breath of the Wild threw that all away. So it has like a brand new physics engine. And, you have these shrines, and, you go into a shrine, and it's like a little mini puzzle level that will have you utilize, Link's abilities, items, weapons, puzzle solving, fighting, whatever you're doing. And you complete like a little trial. So it might take you, each shrine might take you a few minutes to do, like 5 minutes or something like that. And, you get an item. And if you get 4 of those items, you can convert that into more stamina or a heart. And that's basically like how Link gets his heart pieces. That's how Link gets stamina, because there's the stamina wheel from Skyward Sword. So you can like literally climb anything. If you run, climb, fight, anything you basically do, it requires stamina. And as you get more, your character is able to, explore further, do more. But honestly, with the modern Zelda, so Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it really does just throw you to the wolves. There are people, like, it is wild, who will just, go fight Ganon in the first 10 minutes because they're, you can throw a shield down and like surf around and move really fast. Like, they're so good at the game, because I think the games are actually pretty tough in terms of the combat. But one thing that was lacking in Breath of the Wild that I always missed is like, you have these 4 divine beasts, which are these giant mechanical monsters. Looks like an elephant, looks like a bird, looks like a salamander. I forget what the other one is. Elephant, if I didn't say elephant already. But you go in there and you're essentially like exploring around, and those are supposed to kind of represent like the proper temples. But in Breath of the Wild, they did not feel like that. And they were very loose, and everything was very slippery. And for the game to have been like, you can climb and explore anything in this world, and then you get into one of these divine beasts, and it's like, well, that's not the case anymore. Like, you can't climb anything at all. Here's a new set of criteria and rules, and everything's going to be really slippery. And you're not going to have like your traditional items, so to speak. Like, you're not going to have the hook shot. You'll have bomb. Like, it's very different, right? So the traditional experience of beating temples and fighting like a final boss, it was much different in Breath of the Wild, and that left it feeling, I didn't enjoy it. It didn't feel like I was playing a Zelda game, and that's fine, because I have to, as I get older, I also kind of have to understand that, Nintendo is going to have to innovate these franchises, and it might be different than something I'm expecting or something that I'm used to, but it doesn't make it bad, So sometimes, I feel like, hey, maybe I just want to play a traditional 2D or 3D Zelda game, and that's fine too. But you also have to understand that things will change over time. And Nintendo is changing it, well. Like, Breath of the Wild is still a phenomenal game. So here's where Tears of the Kingdom is interesting. So I waited 2 years to play it. I was like, man, after Breath of the Wild, I'm really nervous to play this really big, people put hundreds of hours into these games, and Tears of the Kingdom, I saw one article when I was just looking up sales numbers and stuff, and it was like, I put 300 hours into Tears of the Kingdom, and now, the Switch 2 version's bringing me back, and that makes me happy that Nintendo is giving the option for people to like, play it on the new hardware and get like the, the enhancement packs and everything like that. I think there is value in that. And I think there is a lot of value for Nintendo in particular to modernize any games that they can and bring them to their current hardware to allow people to play them. And like, the greatest example that I can think of that is like so frustrating is like, it's impossible to play like the first 5 generations of Pokemon, maybe even 6, but the first 5 in particular, like the 2D style, on basically anything. Like, you could have done it on the 3DS. You could download Gens 1 and Gens 2, but that they just stuck there. Just crazy. It's like, you got to throw them on Nintendo Switch Online. It could have taken so long to do it. Just get them on there. Either let me buy them or make them a part of the subscription service like yesterday. But Tears of the Kingdom does a much better job with the temples. So my overall just views, like, how do I feel about these games? Or Tears of the Kingdom, how do I feel about it? It was so awesome being able to play like a 2-year-old game That is so phenomenal, and like have no um nothing was spoiled. I didn't check any. I didn't do anything. Like I had no idea what I was going into. I didn't know the story. I literally knew nothing about this, and it was phenomenal to see how they innovated Breath of the Wild. Like it's kind of crazy to think of them as a just a developer, because I really feel like Nintendo does push themselves to be different. And you know, I hope they continue to do that and bring back some of their older franchises too, and maybe figure out like how to make Star Fox different but also good. But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom fixes, in my opinion, at least well enough, the temple situation. So not only have they kind of like named, you know, the temples, so to speak. I think there's, you know, 5+ of them, depending on how you count some of them. Um, but you know, early on, I accidentally went to what was the Fire Temple, um, just because the game is just like, yeah, go explore, go do things. I kind of just got infatuated with exploring that I forgot to maybe follow a path that made more sense in the game. So I kind of went to like the Fire Temple was a little bit harder than for that being like the first. I had like 4 hearts. I had like no stamina, and I'm like, you know, fight. I got making it through this temple. I'm like, if the boss hits me, like even bumps into me, I'm one shot. I'm dead. So like I was doing shrines up to that point, but I like if the boss hit me, I died. So you know, I had to get through this temple, but it was really satisfying to get to the temple and seeing Nintendo's creativity with the physics engine, but it said Fire Temple. You know what I mean? And it's like they made it feel like a Fire Temple. They made it feel like there was a boss fight. Like it felt like I was navigating. I love structure in video games. Give me an open world, but give me structure. You know, so you know, Skyrim's a great example. I have a map, and I can go. I can literally go anywhere and do anything I want, and I can explore. But I have that map. I can fast travel, and I have some quests that can guide me if like I want to get back on track of like, hey, what was I doing 5 hours ago? Instead of exploring the series of caves that I went through. Um, but Tears of the Kingdom does a phenomenal job of providing the modern day Breath of the Wild framework, but making the things more temple oriented, um, and giving you that ability to solve puzzles, which it felt more puzzle solving while I was in the temples, which I really liked. And then also giving you like unique, boss fights, even if some of them are better than others. Um, but giving you unique boss fights to kind of accomplish that feeling of accomplishment. And I love this style of Link. He's just your quiet hero who gets the job done. And kind of, he doesn't really ever talk, but he seems really good at relationship building somehow. And they do that through the storytelling of however many years after Breath of the Wild this is. You kind of see, some of the reoccurring characters and what they've done in in a couple of years. What's interesting here is I'm going to do some spoilers. Now, the spoilers of this, so spoiler alert, I'll say that now. So I'll give you a couple seconds to like pause it or skip over it. But one thing I will say is the original announcement video for Tears of the Kingdom had this in there. So I feel comfortable talking about it. I don't think it'll ruin your experience, but Link and Zelda go underground, and there's like this, like I don't know if you want to call it calamity, but there's like this weird goop that's kind of like poisoning and disintegrating everything. And as you like travel down, you discover a mummified Ganondorf, which is horrifying. And what's really interesting about this too is like the music's really creepy. And I heard, maybe this is just a rumor, but I heard that if you play the music backwards, it's actually saying, "Oh no, Link found the body. Now Hyrule will perish," or something like that. And Link, two things happen. Whatever that calamity or whatever that goop is, it touches the Master Sword and disintegrates and kills it. So the Master Sword just like melts and like shatters apart. And Link also loses his arm. Can we pour out a drink for Link here? Can we give Link as a character like I don't know. Like does he have to constantly be going into a comas and all of the world's being destroyed and losing his arm? Like can't we just like be good to our guy? Like he just has the worst luck. But you know, he's also, you know, the number one guy, right? So he's the number one, you know, hero. He's got to, you know, guard and protect the princess and do all this stuff, which never seems to really work out. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are like, you know, he's not succeeding in guarding the princess very well. So I don't know if he should be fired. But what's interesting about some of these changes with Tears of the Kingdom is not only do you have your massive Hyrule open world, which is already bonkers. So if you've played Breath of the Wild, you kind of already know like the map is just it could probably be shorter, or excuse me, it could probably be smaller and be a better experience, but it's just absolutely huge. Tears of the Kingdom has that map, but then they added an underground to explore and floating islands and like a sky area because there is a character or a couple of characters that are very prominent to the story that you know help Link and like give him a cool green reattached arm that has like special powers. But you have this like whole sky area too. So the game is just absolutely massive. Like there is just so much stuff going on, so much exploration. And you know, if Breath of the Wild was like a 9 on the player freedom and creativity, then in terms of like Spinal Tap, Tears of the Kingdom would be an 11 out of 10 in terms of this because, you know, during the development cycle, they really looked at how players were playing Breath of the Wild and they were like, oh, they came up with a few ideas of how to make this more creative. So in Tears of the Kingdom, the physics engine is crazy, but you can literally build and like create anything that you want to. Like if you want to make a flying helicopter, you can make a flying helicopter. If you want to make a giant machine that like swings an axe and fights enemies and just like moves forward and like you can build this. So they have templates for like you know, flyers and balloons and like things that you can utilize or essentially like cars, like buggies or cars. And as part of like the rebuilding Hyrule thing, which it is really nice to see in Tears of the Kingdom, Hyrule's being rebuilt. But they are like, hey, why is there this giant hole and crater and like all this poison coming out of like Hyrule Castle again? Like, I would never want to live there. I honestly feel like if you live in Hyrule, you want to live like far away from everything. Don't be around Hyrule Castle or the royalty. Like they're always don't be friends with Link. You're gonna get killed somehow. But so there's always like items, planks, like you can literally monsters. There's probably like 50 different monster items that fall off of them. Different like there is just so you can literally take all of these components and just do anything that you want to do, and there's probably like 1,000 different ways to complete an objective. You know, there's you know, hey, build a car and drive over here so you're faster. Like there's, you know, like that's probably like the standard way, but then there's like other ways of like, oh, you can attach a rocket to something and just like, you know, you can attach a rocket to your shield, and when you hold out your shield, the rocket will activate and you'll go flying up. And you have a battery meter too, so you can like expand this battery meter where things like rockets and other items, these zony artifacts that you kind of find, you know, and there's even these gigantic bubblegum machine looking things where these capsules come out, so you can have like, you know, hydrants, rockets, and these other items that have abilities that allow you to like build things. You can like just have them with you. It's absolutely crazy. Like you almost have to give yourself probably like 5 to 10 hours of just taking in the game and taking in and accepting like how things are with this physics engine and like, oh, I can build this, I can do this. Where, you know, in a lot of the older Zeldas, they were so much physically smaller and structured that it was like, okay, I must collect 3 jewels, and to do that, I have to go to 3 dungeons and beat them. Then I can go to, this temple slash dungeon and get this item, which allows me to go here, and then I have to collect 5 of those, and then I fight the final boss. This is just like go anywhere, do anything. The underground is absolutely gigantic. It's also so interesting because like if you use your bows, what one thing they did is you can attach literally like any component or any item to an arrow, and it has abilities. But like one of the main ones, for example, is like there's like a glowing bulb plant that you can find, and you can attach it to an arrow. You shoot it somewhere, and it lights up the darkness. You would think, with not being able to see very far, and like they like it's just crazy. There's monsters under there. They're generally a little bit stronger in the underground as well. You would think that wouldn't be fun to explore, but I actually had a really good time kind of exploring that. And there's a series of what would you call them, statues that kind of point you in the right direction of kind of what you're looking to do. There's a quest that takes you down there, so it kind of gives you an example of like what you're looking to accomplish. But it could be something cool where there's a boss fight that you can go underground and re-experience and get like a chest with like a special item or something like that. So the game is also slow in terms of upgrading because you're upgrading stamina, hearts, and now a battery meter, which is time consuming to do. And the more battery you have, for example, that was kind of how they put the cap on it, so like players just didn't completely break the game. But if you're using a rocket, the rocket or the balloon with like a lantern underneath it to create like a flying platform. After your battery runs out, you can recharge it, but once that runs out, the thing just stops working. It just drops. It's part of the physics engine as well. So, and one thing I will say is some of the power. So you have your Ultra Hand, which allows you to basically grab anything, combine anything. Everything sticks together. So like you can take any items that you can grab and like just stick them together and make them do things, which makes the puzzle solving like so interesting. You almost really never run into the same puzzle twice, or at least if you do, it's like it can be completed in a similar fashion. As you gain more experience, you're like, oh, I'll just do it like this. This time I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z and complete this puzzle in a completely different manner because now I have more items. I have better insight, and I kind of know how to play the game a little bit better. The only like real drawback I will say to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is Link can somehow move and go and climb, and just like he can be so fast and quick and efficient. Like you'll see people like shield surf, like, hey, I'm gonna go over there, and they'll just shield surf and like blow themselves up and send Link flying and like somehow survive, and like he gets there in like 2 seconds. Like I said, in this game you have Tears of the Kingdom, you have rockets and like different ways you can build a car and just drive somewhere, and that's all good. But I have noticed in terms of the combat, the one thing that I wish they could find a way to kind of change is all of the items and bosses, or excuse me, all of the enemies and bosses are very strong. So, you get better armor, you can improve your armor, you can, drink potions that give you more heart pieces, or eat, cook a food dish that gives you like 5 extra hearts or however many extra hearts. But if you get hit, you still get hit pretty hard. You know what I mean? So, in the old games, or the old 3D games, you could have the Z targeting, lock on, and move left or right, and you could dodge incoming attacks easier. So in one aspect, you could say like the combat was more basic, and maybe too easy or something like that, because like Link wasn't too much in danger. Like it was pretty easy. You could just like kind of strafe them, and get around enemies. But honestly, like if you stumble upon an enemy and you don't have enough stamina to like just completely run away, or like you can't run away, like you're on a platform or something like that, and they just walk towards you, and they have like, they're huge, like all the enemies are huge, like there's a lot of I don't know if they're called Goroks, basically the dragon boss from the original NES version of Zelda, the 3-headed ones. You can fight those. The fight is really fun, but then I feel like I burned through so many of my items and like I'm like, geez, now I gotta go like loot and collect and stuff some more. But I did enjoy those, boss fights. But you just get your butt kicked really easy because you can't strafe, like you can't get away from an enemy effectively. So it's like you have to be able to stagger them and like do a lot of damage to them and like be able to heal. So I found that very interesting. Now I could just be terrible, but I really believe that if you have an enemy that does good damage, and especially if they're huge, like if they just lock onto Link and walk towards Link and start attacking, like he is going to get killed. Whereas something like Elden Ring or the Dark Souls series, like you have a dodge ability and a window to dodge, which is I don't want to say forgiving because I feel like Elden Ring kind of eliminated that because some of the enemy attack patterns are just absolutely insane at this point. But you could dodge an attack even if they run right up on you and start going crazy. Whereas with Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, it doesn't feel like that. And if they keep this open world style of this modern Zelda of the last 8 or 9 years, I would like them to continue in that direction. Now, one other thing I want to say too is we talked about the underworld and then the main Hyrule map is you also have an overworld. So what's so interesting here is you go into the towers that unlock a chunk of the map. Well, now they throw you 700 feet into the sky and like Link kind of I don't want to say parachutes down. You can use your little glider, but you kind of like free fall like you're jumping out of an airplane. And now there's like a sky world too. And I mean, it's not as big as the Hyrule map it feels, but like everywhere you go in the proper Hyrule ground area, there are some islands basically in every single section where there's a tower that you can explore and like complete. And that is also fascinating because like you get three different feelings. Like Hyrule proper has a unique theme and feeling to it. The Sky World has a unique theme and feel to it. And I just wish I could like take this game 15 years, into the past or 20 years into the past and just be like, yo, the Zelda games are going to be so huge and the world's going to be so crazy that like they shoot Link into the sky and you can literally like pull out your paraglider and fly anywhere and explore anything. Like, oh, if you see an island, like, yeah, you can just hover over to it and go check it out. That is just like absolutely like mind boggling at this point. And I think it's almost taken for granted with how different it is from the previous Zelda games. But one thing I will say is, like I said, I'm a long term fan of the Legend of Zelda series. And I do believe that with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, that if they continue this storytelling method, this gameplay method, this open world method, I think this can be the blueprint for Zelda games going forward. I never want Nintendo to lose sight of the demand of like, hey, just having proper dungeons, like more concrete dungeons would be something I'd be very interested in, and maybe tweaking the combat a little bit because of the ability to use your abilities, use your abilities and like you can make a fire arrow, ice arrow, you can make an arrow have any effect you want instantly but make a way of combat feeling just a little bit different would be something I'd be interested in. But I would hate to say, just as kind of like a lover of video games and an experiencer and a player, to say like, oh, well, you should do X. I don't like taking hardline stances on that anymore. Um, like I can look at, the updates they did with dungeons and be like, I see where they were coming from a development standpoint, and I liked it. And I would like to see more of that and something to do with the combat as well. We spent all this time talking and didn't even really discuss the story. And we'll kind of just talk about it just a little bit, and then I'll kind of give my final thoughts on the game. But the story is very interesting. You're going to have your time travel because there is, an old world that you learn from, like, there's some sky people and everything like that. There's Hylians. They kind of explain, I guess I want to say origins, but I don't know if I'm correct there. But I would say the origins of how, like, the Hylian race came to be, like, how everyone kind of, like, came to be, what the old people were like. But you mix the past, with the present. And I'm very happy it wasn't spoiled, but there is... trying to think of how to say it. So I think it was in Breath of the Wild, but maybe it was just Tears of the Kingdom. There's dragons flying around, and just kind of seeing, how that all plays out with Link and like these beasts and characters. It was very pleasant to have it not spoiled and to get to experience that and not know what was coming. That was very enjoyable. Everyone probably pretty much knows already because this was kind of like part of the promotional marketing materials and early trailers, but you do fight Ganondorf or Ganon, however you want to say it. And once again, another epic boss fight. But it is funny, like how difficult they were able to make him. I still feel like the last bosses of both games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, were actually really hard. It was funny when I played Breath of the Wild originally. I did so much stuff in it, and then because of the dungeons, I was like, I don't feel like playing this anymore. I played it for like 50 hours. Well, I ended up coming back to it like 5 years later and put another 20 hours into it and fought the final boss. But I completely forgot about parrying. So like if you hold a shield, you can I think you press the button and to click it, and like Link will parry. And part of Breath of the Wild was parrying laser attacks that basically do like 10 hearts of damage to you with the guardians and stuff. But I remember going into that boss fight and like if I would have just parried Ganondorf in Breath of the Wild, that would have like made the opening so much easier. But I forgot you could even do that. So like I was literally just like running around and like dodging attacks and like shooting them with bomb arrows. I used like all of my resources, all of my bomb arrows, and just like such a funny thing. So I'm like, oh, you just parry and that like stuns them, then you can go hit them. Like, oh, I feel like an idiot. But yeah, the final boss was also crazy and just another great story. Nintendo, I feel like, has done a phenomenal job with pretty much all of the Zelda stories, but I think they do a really good job of modernizing their storytelling, and you have like a really quality experience, not only with the story but the physics engine, and like the uniqueness and just player creativity is really what makes these games shine. And I can kind of see like where people, if they're if players aren't interested in that sandboxy experience, I can kind of understand where you're like, I would like a more traditional experience. But one thing I can say is it has been a really good experience and time to kind of just focus on playing good games, like really highly regarded games. And like, I put over 70 hours into Tears of the Kingdom, and it was just a really fun experience. And I really had a good time with it. And who knows, with the Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo might take the Zelda franchise and just say, hey, we're gonna Breath of the Wild it again. Like we're just gonna spend 5 years and create something completely different. And I would be all for it. Tears of the Kingdom, the Switch 2 version, is an absolute must play. It's an awesome game. I think everybody should play it. It improved over so much of Breath of the Wild for me that like it kind of resold me on that new open world experience, and just that like that kind of unparalleled player creativity and exploration and everything. But thank you for joining in today and listening to this discussion. Once again, this has been Big Reed, and thank you for listening to Gaming's Lost Memories.